Alrighty, so good morning. My name's Chris All. This is Hadley Pettigrew. We're both from Integin. I'm out of our Wellington office, Hadley out of the Christchurch office. How are you this morning, Hadley?
Pretty good.
Big night last night?
Oh, yeah.
Or were you prepping demos?
Prepping demos, but yeah.
So, we're talking about CRM 2011 today, and this session is the Dev Deep Dive session. We've taken a 3-day training course we've built for Microsoft, and we've squashed it into 1 hour. So you'll have to bear with us. We're going to move pretty quickly. We may not get through all of it. We may chop into lunch a little bit. We'll have some decisions towards the end as to how we go. Basically, we're going to rock along. I'm going to introduce some features. Hadley's going to do some demos for us. This stuff is raw, right? So if stuff breaks, my sincerest apologies. Yeah. So these are pre-beta bits. They're out of the beta tree, but it's sort of daily build stuff. So it can be a bit problematic. We're going to talk a bit about solutions and solution packaging. We're going to talk about sandbox plugins. We're going to talk about role-based UIs and field-level security. We're going to talk about the OData endpoint web resources and how to consume them with HTML and jQuery. And we're finally going to talk about Windows Azure and Azure App Fabric, maybe based on time and the fact that we know the bits that we've got there don't work at the moment. Sound exciting? Fizzing. Right, let's start with solutions. So who thinks CRM version 4 has a great application lifecycle story? Right, so through your giggles, I'm going to assume you don't. Would you agree with that, Hadley?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's pretty hard to do a deployment now.
It's pretty hard to do a deployment, right? Because you're basically going and sort of plucking out a whole lot of resources. So solutions help us to solve that. So solutions provide us with an ALM story for CRM. Right, and they provide us with a much simpler way as an ISV to package up the content that makes up our solution. So, obviously, pre-version 5, we really had no concept of what makes up the functionality of a sort of a custom solution on top of CRM. It made it very hard for ISVs to ship stuff, right, for 2 key reasons. One, the ISV shipped the stuff and then the end user broke it, right, and then you get the support calls. Or the ISV shipped the stuff and it was broken by default. In other words, it was a steaming pile of crap, and the user wanted to uninstall it, and it had basically gone and polluted and populated and totally screwed over their CRM system. So we really needed something that allowed us to bundle up a solution, potentially protect parts of our solution, have an install and uninstall experience. So that's what we get with CRM 2011 solutions. You can see I've pinched these slides from a V5 deck, because we're not talking about 2011 in the slides. Please no blogging, tweeting about this stuff, folks, just because we've got special dispensation to talk about this early, and I'd rather it didn't go out and spread its way around the web quite yet until the beta has released. So, we're now able to package up our solution components, right? So that means that we can pick up anything. We're going to be rattling off a list of some of the things we can package.
Well, we could package the account customizations and the forms that are related to that. We could even package up any custom entities we've got. Say you wanted to have a room associated for your equipment training and the gym membership program.
Ribbon?
Yeah, ribbon toolbars.
Sort of ISV config type stuff.
Yep. And JavaScript, even web resources.
Right, so basically anything. Yeah? That is then an installable package. You can hand that off. That can be installed by people. It can be uninstalled by people. We have very granular dependency tracking, which means we can track dependencies between aspects in our solution and make sure that we don't break stuff. Right? We're really trying to minimize breaking stuff. But at the same time, as an ISV, you can ship a solution to a customer in such a way that that customer can extend out that solution, can continue to take advantage of that rich customization capability you get with Microsoft CRM. So these are some of the things you can put into a CRM solution package. Some of them you should all be familiar, right? Things like attributes, views, right? Some of them are new, things like multiple forms, right? We're going to talk about those shortly, right?
Yep.
Role-based UI.
Correct.
Web resources, going to be new to a few people. Dashboards. Who saw the dashboards this morning? Who liked the dashboards for 9 o'clock in the morning? Yeah, me too, right? Reports, field level security profiles. That was a pretty popular feature this morning too, right? So all of the stuff can be packaged up, put into the package and deployed independently. We have a concept of layering in solutions. Are we going to show solution layers?
Yes, we are. We're going to have multiple solutions, adding on extra features in each solution.
So the idea behind sort of these managed layers is that at the base level with CRM out of the box, we have a base sort of system solution that includes a set of entities that you get when you install the application. we're able to then install packages, solution packages on top of that. And actually the install order matters. Right? So we might have installed a sort of a vertical market solution called CRM for schools. We might then have a managed solution that we've built in-house called Managed Solution B. And then we're going to have a whole bundle of unmanaged customizations. Right? That's just the stuff that we jump in to IE and sort of do some tweaking. Yeah? And basically we project that through a series of dependency tracking rules, through a series of rules that determine what cancels out what, how does stuff get merged, to what the user actually sees at the top layer, i.e. what does this look like when I open up the contact form. Right, so we have this idea of a single unmanaged layer, and then we have multiple managed layers. We have one layer per managed solution, and that order does matter. Right, and the reason it matters is we have this concept of conflict resolution. We have a couple of types, right?
Yes.
So we've got merge.
Yep.
And so that's going to be used for certain types of resources. Things like...
web resources or even entities.
Right. So what we do with merge is we're trying to identify areas where actually customizations can sort of coexist. So a good example is the ribbon. So if we look at the ribbon, at the system layer, right, at that base solution, we have a button called S. In solution A, we had another button called A. In solution B, we had another button called B. Then at the unmanaged layer, we hide button A. Right, so what happens is we can actually then do a merge on these ribbons so that the projection to the user is button S and button B. We also obviously have last in wins conflict resolution. Right, so in this case, we have a contact entity. In solution A, we've changed the label of one of those elements. Right? We've added some other customizations. In solution B, we've changed the label again. So this installation order matters, and the projection ultimately ends up being solution B label. So why don't we jump into a demo?
Sure. So press 2, I guess. So what we see here is the new area where we can modify customizations and add solutions. So each row we see there is actually a solution package, for example.
So we've got, what have we got? 5 solution packages,
yes.
Well, 4 solution packages installed, and
there's the default one, which is always there, and that's where usually your uncustomized customizations will, where your custom stuff will go that, say, the user might do. For example, they might want to change the name of a field on one of your managed solutions.
So that's that top layer, right, Hadley?
Yes.
Not the bottom layer, folks. That's the top layer. That's basically the big catch-all bucket into which all of your customizations
Correct.
end up.
So what we have here is we have actually a common solution for this fitness centre, and then we also have added on top equipment maintenance and personal training, and even some jQuery OData for later solution.
So we've layered out our fitness centre application. On top of that, we've got some functionality for equipment management. On top of that, we've got some functionality for personal training. We've layered all of these together to make up our gym management application.
Correct. So say you're an ISV and you wanted to, say, package up your fitness centre, and you wanted to make it so that people can't customise certain fields. For example, you've got your room entity. I'll open this solution up.
Everyone goes to Les Mills. So they've got about sort of 8 rooms there, yeah? I was there last night. It was really good. RPM class.
So we scroll down to the room entity. We can open that up and say, okay, well, I require, my JavaScript requires this certain field not to change. And it so happens to be the location. I need this to exist. And if the end user decides, I don't like this field, I want to remove it, well,
my whole app breaks.
Yeah, everything will break.
So
bad. We go, okay,
get support calls.
I'm going to go make this a special type of property. I say, I don't want it to be customized. So you've also got several other levels of doing this. Like you can say, okay, I don't want display name to change, or I want the requirement level not to even change. So for now, we'll just say we don't want any customizations at all.
So we basically lock this down. This is special to our application. The user can't customize
And you can even do this for forms. so you can make sure that people can't actually edit a form. So now when you export this as a managed solution, when the user imports this, they will go to customizations, try to customize it, and they won't be able to. I believe I can show you this.
All good. Let's do it.
So
I hope
we'll
you can show me it.
export this customization as solution file. This might take a little while.
Yes, ask a question while we're doing that. No, it's unlocked by default. Right. So it's unlocked by default. And again, this is really focused at ISV type scenarios. You typically wouldn't do it in sort of an enterprise type deployment, right? Because you're potentially creating a rod for your back. And in fact, you'd probably typically use an unmanaged solution.
Correct, because managed has all its nice features of being locked down and everything, but typically most users won't need to uninstall.
Yeah, yeah. So, for example, if you think about the enterprise scenario, there is nothing to stop you from behaving like you do today. Right? So, it's not blocking it off for you.
And also, managed solutions make small tweaks slightly more tricky to do.
Yeah.
And then when you reinstall some more customizations later, it might overwrite. So.
Okay, so we've got this, and this is basically just a zip file.
Yep.
Are we going to open that zip file?
We will do.
We might as well, eh?
So this zip file also includes some ISV config settings for changing the way the left-hand bar looks, for example, with the workplace and equipment management and what entities are visible in each tab.
So let's maybe chuck that on disk and then open it up, huh?
Yep. So I'll just chuck it in here and open that folder. So we will extract this here. So as you can see, this is just a zipped up set of XML files and web resources. So in here we've got, for example, a jQuery HTML file. So this is for a later exercise. So this is a web resource we can bring into forms. I'll show you this later in more detail. But we also have this customizations XML document.
And you should be pretty familiar with that. Right?
Yeah,
it's just what we've got
it's just a basic customizations XML, which you'd see in CRM 4 now, and that includes the ISV config changes.
Okay.
So you can even edit this and repackage it up and import it again if you like.
That's moderately supported.
Yes, you can actually find the schemas that they use for validating it inside the CRM install directory and bring those into Visual Studio to actually validate your customization file if you start doing editing of it.
Alrighty.
Very handy. So we're just going to import this managed solution into another org I've got set up.
So the reason we're using a second org is you can't, and you'll need to have lots of orgs when you do your development, folks, because you're going to want to have an org that you use that holds your solution in unmanaged form, and then you'll have an org you want that's going to be able to receive and install your solution package as a managed solution for actually testing. So this is what, Contoso 4?
Correct. So we'll just import the solution. So.
Ooh, hello, ship it.
Yep. So we have a few bugs still. This is an early beta build, so to be expected. I hope it still works. Import. Yeah, import our customization file we just exported. This may take a little while.
If you guys want to see the full 3-day training course run here in New Zealand, please badger Microsoft. Right? I'd love to pick up our 3-day training content and run it for Microsoft New Zealand. So please make sure you encourage them to run that training here and not just in Sydney. But at a minimum, we should be doing it in Sydney. So
definitely, it's very valuable.
It's pretty easy to get to Sydney, even for the day.
So this might take a little while. It's quite a big solution.
Should we should I jump back to the deck? Why don't I jump back to the deck and we'll talk a bit about field level security and things while we do that. Okay, so while we, rather than watching progress bars, let's talk a little bit about role-based UI and field level security. So briefly, role-based UI allows us to effectively create multiple form views for a particular entity and have those form views selected on the basis of the user's role. So a good example that we use for our our application is the idea of a different view for people,
Yes.
as opposed, so one for the membership people at the gym,
Correct.
right? And one for the personal trainers at the gym, because they actually care about completely different stuff, right? So we actually show a different role-based UI based on the user's role. And then we have some ability to work with client APIs in JavaScript to actually make some decisions and further tweak that role. It's actually a little bit different to field level security. And field level security should hopefully get everybody stoked, because field level security has always been bloody hard to do. So field level security is all about restricting access on a field by field basis to certain fields within an entity. Right? So think of it as like, there are financial fields in that entity. Yeah, we might want to lock those down pretty tightly to a very sort of select group of user roles without locking down the entire entity, without sort of bastardizing our data model and shifting those fields out just so that we can control them. So, when we set field level security, it is a global setting, so it touches everything, right? It touches every UI. It touches views, reports, auditing, right? So if you go and see audit data and you're locked out of that field level security, you cannot see that in the audit view, right? We can extend the field access rules using the SDK, and we can create these settings using the SDK. We're moving necessarily fast here, guys. So if you are not able to see that field, there are no exceptions to seeing that field, right? We do not return that down to the client. For those who do field level security at the moment, right, where you do it with JavaScript, it's fairly trivial for me to work out what you're doing, right? So if I really want to compromise that, it's very, very easy. In this case, we don't even send it down to the client. If you update a secured field, we throw you an exception, and we treat them as nulls in query evaluation. People understand why that's important, because otherwise I could probably use carefully crafted queries to work out what the data is in these fields. Right? I could write effectively an attack robot to start to elucidate information out of these. When we administer access now for entities, we effectively now have cross-cutting rules here. So by role, we're going to specify what rows horizontally you receive out of the data set, and then your field level security profile is going to determine what fields are nulled out for you. Right? So your role effectively deals with you both horizontally and vertically through your data set. How are we looking at our import?
Very close to being
Very
finished.
close. So if I switch this back on, are we going to be able to have a look at a role-based UI?
Hopefully, though the progress bar doesn't seem very... there we go. It's just finished now. Handy.
So you'll see what happened when we imported our solution. Right?
Yeah.
So you'll see that there was a pretty big solution there. A whole bunch of stuff happened.
So because it was unmanaged, I need to include quite a few components for it actually to be able to be imported as a managed solution. So it gives you a warning message saying, hey, you need to add the required components for this solution to actually work, and it'll tell you which components are missing. Very handy.
So what do you reckon? Should we have a look at role-based UI? Do you want to...
Yeah, I'll first show the effect of that managed properties while I'm there as well. So we'll open up...
So this is Contoso 4 again.
Yep, we'll open up a default solution because we are now making tweaks to a managed solution, so this is where we have to do it. And if we look at entities and look at...
So now we're in sort of the role of the customer who's purchased the ISV solution and installed it on our own server, yeah?
And just so I can show you the managed properties, I'll pretend you're a customer and go, okay, I don't actually want the location of that room to actually be called location. You think I'm being clever and I'll change it in here. And then you'll notice that once it loads, it'll be all grayed out. So this means you cannot make any changes whatsoever to that attribute. Very handy.
I think that's quite useful, yeah?
Now, at the beginning you said that those sequence in which you install those
Yes.
need to be predetermined. What if you're a customer and you buy multiple customizations from different ISVs and they need to decide which order to install those from?
The customer will need to install. So you will potentially need to have some communication there. So you should be ensuring, and you will notice that we actually have a prefix for our effectively organisation namespace. So in this case, Contoso Fitness, that writes this gym package, they've prefixed all of their customizations with Contoso _. So what that means is effectively they don't end up conflicting with somebody else who might want to create a rooms entity, right? Because they'll be Fabricam _rooms rather than Contoso _rooms.
Correct. So that's done by the publisher. So you can have a publisher for your company. And the people that then install these managed solutions can't actually make a publisher with that same prefix.
Yeah.
So that will stop them trying to, say, make fake entities.
So we do have collision protection there.
Yes. So if we have a look at multiple forms now, just to show role-based forms, we want to make a new form, a new main form. We want this to be applicable for these certain roles. So I believe we have to save the form first. So we'll just throw on location.
So drag and drop editor.
Yep.
Those who didn't come along this morning.
Just drag in the right location there. And we just want name. Hit save.
So we've now created that second main form, and we're going to assign the second main form to a different role.
Yeah, so we'll say, okay, we only want this to be visible for sales manager. Or actually, we'll just use gym instructor. Then we can just click save and close and publish all customizations. Now we have a new form called new form, which we can rename, for the gym instructor. Very useful. So typically you'll remember having to hide tabs and with JavaScript to manage based on what role comes in, and you have to do
a hell of a lot of work.
Service call to find that out. Well, we can do that now, just out of the box.
Yeah.
How does it resolve which form to show if you users in more than one role?
We actually give you a selector. So if you're in more than one role, you can choose which form you want to see.
Yes. Cool.
How well can we publish?
I don't actually have an account. I can show you the effect of this but
Okay. No, that's all right. We should push on.
yes.
We're good?
Yeah, we're good.
We are moving quickly. We have 1 hour to get through some stuff. Is this useful so far? All good. So, flexible programming. This is one of the beauty of CRM is that whole web services model that sits in behind it, right? Because you can pick that up and you can consume that really nicely from your custom ASP.NET application. One of the big pushes around CRM 2011 is this desire to have these sort of really rich CRM online apps. And the goal was to have a nice progressive sort of on-ramp to building out these custom solutions. So you didn't immediately need to jump out to the great big sledgehammer, right, and hit it with an ASP.NET custom iframe. So we want to have nice, easy to consume service endpoints that support not only sort of rich, early bound, code generation type sort of consumption, but also really lightweight consumption. Consuming a RESTful endpoint from JavaScript. Right? And the reason we want that is there's now an ability to have what we call web resources inside CRM. And a web resource allows us to put a piece of hostable content such that it can be retrieved via an HTTP GET, but it's stored in the CRM database and it's packaged in a CRM solution. So rather than having to push out a custom iframe into the ISV folder, we actually create an HTML page and save it as a web resource. That means it's saved as part of our solution package. In that HTML page, what we can do is write some jQuery code that calls the CRM service endpoint from JavaScript and actually gives us some custom UI to work with, create, save, and update that sort of information. The OData endpoint with the link stuff gives us a really easy way to consume this. So we can spin up a CRM data context and we can simply new up a contact, right? First name, email, role, object initializers, add to contacts, batch-based saving. So we now have true batch-based saving, which is far more efficient than what we've had to do in the past, where it's basically a round trip every time. So the services really are significantly improved, and we have sort of a session and a half on that in the full training course. But we're actually going to jump in and show you what it looks like to create one of these web resources. A web resource that actually does something. Because you can have web resources that do nothing, right?
Yes.
An image.
Or a blank HTML file.
Or a blank HTML file. Yeah?
Hello.
We're going to do one that actually does stuff, that actually does some jQuerying back up to the server, and gives us a richer UI than the out-of-the-box CRM UI that's entirely CRM Online compatible, right? That doesn't require us to have any sort of ASP.NET hosting whatsoever.
Correct.
So why don't we do that?
Sure.
And we probably need to change. There we go.
Right, so here you can see we've got some web resources here. The two key ones to look
Just
at.
quickly show us how we got there, Hadley.
So how we got there was, start from the beginning, I opened up the solution which I have for the hands-on lab, and just first thing you see is components.
So that's the roll-up of all of the components that sit in that solution.
So because it's quite a small solution, there's only 5 items there, it's very easy to
So we've got
see.
some customizations to person, right? We've got an attribute on lifestyle profile, and then we've got 3 web resources.
Correct. So the 3 web resources we have are an HTML file, which will sit inside an iframe. I can demonstrate this to you in a moment, and allow you to update lifestyle profiles on a person.
So we're talking about lifestyle profile. Are you a smoker? Do you have diabetes, right? All really important stuff if you're going to the gym, because you're probably trying to change both of those things.
Correct. And then we also have a jQuery library in there.
So that's 1.4.1 min spec
Yes.
.javascript.
Won't open that up because it's quite compressed. We also have the jQuery data operations. So that's the JavaScript file that we're including in the HTML file, so that we can...
So we can consume OData, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So these are web resources. So we can actually go and access those as web resources by going to CRM, whack Contoso 1, whack web resources, whack the name of our web resource. Right? So you can then serve those up and consume them as you will. So we're going to be consuming the jQuery files from our .htm file.
So I'll show you this working in progress. And if we go look at people, and we open a person, say Cat Francis.
So remember, this may look like an iframe that's actually an ASP.NET iframe, but this is entirely CRM Online ready. There is no ASP.NET magic here.
Here's the iframe, the web resource that's been included into our form. And as you can see, rather basic. So we want to create a new one, say
2010.
2010, Cat Francis is a smoker. He's been smoking for 30 years. Packs per week, he smokes 100, or 99, sorry.
That sounds expensive.
And he's trying to quit. But he's also got diabetes, type
B.
Type B, yep.
Insulin dependent.
Has a family history, not currently on medication.
Oh, he's a walking basket case.
And regular exercise of
1 day,
one day per week, and average hours per exercise session, 1 hour.
Oh.
So he's kind of nuts.
He's a walking bloody heart attack, right?
So we hit save. And so that's going to go away, and you see how quick that is. It's actually created a lifestyle profile.
So why don't we actually look at lifestyle profile? So we basically just created a custom UI for lifestyle profile so that we can make it easier to edit that data without necessarily having to go into the associated lifestyle, across the relationship, open the lifestyle form, create the lifestyle form, show all the fields, write some JavaScript that shows and hides the fields on the form.
And dare I say it, the save is actually quicker than the form does.
Yeah.
So it's very good.
And again, this is all CRM Online compatible. So we can pick this up, bundle it as a web resource, deploy it as a web resource in our solution package. There's no ASP.NET here. Do people think that's quite useful? Right? And obviously, HTML plus jQuery is one way.
Yes.
Silverlight.
That's another way, yes. So we've got lots of options there.
And of course, these things work offline too.
Yes, because it will bring the web resources down to the local computer, and so you can use it in offline mode.
So basically, it gets picked up, pulled down to your local machine, and it's served out of the offline web server that serves up CRM offline in Outlook. Right. So this, folks, this is the way. Only jump out to ASP.NET when you really have to. Right? We should see far less ASP.NET iframes in CRM 2011. Your key extensibility points are HTML plus jQuery,
Yep.
right, and Silverlight.
Correct.
All good.
Go back to you.
So, we do still need sometimes when we need to execute real code, right? Because JavaScript's not really real code, right? It's the sort of stuff that web developers write. So, there are times we want to execute real code. CRM plugins, right, are a really important aspect of CRM. Who's written a plugin before? Everybody, right? Really important. We want to be able to support those in these highly multi-tenanted environments. So that's situations where maybe a partner's hosting CRM for you, where you have a big enterprise-wide CRM that half a dozen departments use, or in particular CRM Online. So we have a solution to that called Sandbox plugins. And Sandbox plugins are all about letting you execute your code on the server, but making sure that you behave yourself. Right? So for those who need a quick background on CRM plugins, obviously when we call the CRM web service, we have a pipeline with a variety of events that we can hook. So, pre-saving the data, post-saving the data. We want to hook into those events and run some code at that point in time. In order to take advantage of the sandbox, we create our plugin by implementing the iPlugin interface. So you will need to change your plugins in order to be sandbox compatible. However, we're going to have backwards compatibility, still, right?
Yes, even back to CRM3 callouts.
Exactly. So if you still have CRM3 callouts, anyone? Let's prepare to admit it, right? So you're still going to be able to install and register those into CRM 2011, though not for CRM Online because it supports Sandbox plugins only. We can stick our assemblies in a bunch of places, but for CRM Online, for Sandbox plugins, have to go in the database. So basically, the sandbox allows our code to be executed in isolation. Right? So it means we have much better support for these multi-tenanted scenarios. And what happens is the sandbox, when it executes your code, it looks at what you're doing. Right? In two ways. First is it implements pretty tight code access security to lock down what you can do. So there's no mucking with the registry. There's no writing stuff out to file. Right? It also watches how good a citizen are you being. Are you consuming lots and lots of clock cycles? If it thinks you are, it's going to whack your plugin. And by whack your plugin, I mean it's going to pull your plugin out of the pipeline, pull your registration. So you do need to be a bit careful here, folks, because if you have really critical business operations that rely on a sandbox plugin, and you do dumb stuff, and your plugin gets whacked, you potentially may be in a situation where that code's not being executed anymore. So the way this works is we have the concept of a separate sandbox server. Now that may be running on your local machine, right, or it could be running on one or more other machines in your server farm. When we execute a sandbox plugin, that execute call basically gets piped across either over the network or I think through named pipes to your sandbox host service. Your sandbox host service pulls the appropriate assemblies out of the cache and it spins up a worker process that's a new Windows process for every single org. So every org has its own Windows process. So that's sort of layer one. Well, layer one of the sandboxing is the fact that we probably put it on another box. Layer two of the sandboxing is the fact that we isolate every org into its own worker process. Layer three is that when we load the assembly, we load the assembly into a separate app domain that allows us to unload the assembly and reload a different type in there later on. We then execute that. Obviously, your plugin is going to make calls back through the SDK, back to CRM, and the sandbox is going to monitor your code as it executes to see if you are being naughty. We can scale out those sandbox servers and we round robin route the execution to one of those sandbox servers as we go.
Yep.
Yes?
With the sandbox servers, are they, when you install them on premise, do you relax the permissions on them so that they can do files and register?
So I don't, no, so I don't know if you can relax the permissions on them or not. But you, correct. So you can't. There are sort of traditional non-sandbox plugins as well.
Correct. So you can. There are two. When you choose to register, you can choose to register as a sandbox or not a sandbox plugin.
And in fact, we'll have a look at the registration tool shortly. We've had some trouble getting Sandbox Solutions and the Azure stuff going in this build that we're running with at the moment, but we're at least going to show you kind of what it looks like if it was working. So let's talk a little bit about the native Windows Azure support. We are tracking pretty well for time. And I mentioned this a bit earlier this morning. All right, so we've just seen with Sandbox plugins how we can execute our code in CRM online. But we do know that there are limitations on that. And there are going to be times when we potentially want to work around those limitations, right? Or when we might actually want to have some processing occur somewhere else other than CRM Online. To help achieve that, there's good support for Windows Azure inside CRM Online. And that support's really in one of two ways. The first is obviously you can pick up a Windows Azure web role and you can write some custom ASP.NET pages and you can host those custom ASP.NET pages as an iframe for your application. Likewise, you can spin up Windows Azure. You can write yourself a custom web portal, right? Because that's a really great way of extending CRM. And you can connect that back to CRM Online. The more interesting one is if we actually want to have plugin code run outside the sandbox, right? Run without those sandbox restrictions. Potentially run on premise. There is support in Windows Azure natively out of the box for us to create a remote plugin. And a remote plugin basically is a plugin that executes somewhere else. And it has the plugin context passed to it over the network. So what happens is our user makes a call to the web services in, say, CRM Online. We've gone through and we've registered a plugin with the plugin registration tool.
Yep.
All right?
Correct.
We're going to show that shortly.
We will.
And we've said this plugin is a remote plugin. So when you need to execute this plugin as part of the pipeline, pick up that context, pass it over the wire, and actually execute that somewhere else, right? And that somewhere else can be buried deep inside the organization. That can be buried in behind the firewall. And the reason for that is that we take advantage of the NAT traversal technology that you get with the App Fabric, with the Azure App Fabric Service Bus. Got to get those names right. Yeah? So the way this works is it's basically the async service that manages this Azure messaging for us, and it is always an asynchronous call, right? So it's always a one-way call of some sort, with the option of making that one-way call a buffered call as well. So that buffered call is kind of cool because it means that if the client's not listening at that point in time, if this thing is a Windows mobile device, right, it can be offline. Right? And we're actually storing it in a buffer here in the service bus. So it's the async service that manages this. And then we have two approaches to this. The first is the out-of-the-box approach. So basically there's a plugin that we're going to have a look at shortly, right, that you can just register through the plugin registration tool that knows how to hand that context over the wire. If you actually want to have a hybrid scenario where you want to maybe do a bit of processing in the sandbox and then hand out over the wire, then it's pretty easy to write some custom code to pick up that context and hand the context over the wire as well.
All right. So first of all, I'll show you what steps you'd take if you wanted to register a Sandbox plugin. Just bring it across the screen. So as you can see here, we've got a...
So show us what that plugin might look like, Hadley. Can you show us a plugin?
The
listener. Do you want to show the listener first? Do you want to show the listener?
Oh yeah, we'll
shortly?
show what Azure. So this is the Azure plugin. This is what a remote plugin would look like.
This is at this side, right? Maybe in Windows Azure,
yes.
Right? In a worker role.
Correct. So this is actually a listener. So it's listening for messages from CRM.
Yeah.
So it implements iService endpoint plugin.
Can we just zoom in on that a bit? Just hit Control and use your scroll wheel. Just zoom in. Thanks, man. Just that otherwise the people who decided they'd sit down the back can't see it.
Yeah, so this is a service endpoint plugin, and as per normal, it's got an execute, which you expect in a normal plugin, and you've got a remote execution context. So it's very similar to original plugin itself.
So it's a pretty similar approach. If you know how to write plugins now, you're going to be able to write these pretty easily.
Correct. But you've also got access to cloud storage and the configuration settings associated to that.
So cloud storage is Windows Azure storage. So we're actually going to work with Windows Azure storage as part of our plugin as well. When we receive the data, we're going to do something with Windows Azure storage.
So this is an example where it just creates a diagnostic for a piece of equipment in the equipment maintenance for a gym.
So any time that we write a row into this entity on premise, the plugin is going to call out through the service bus to Windows Azure, and we're going to write the same data out to a table in Windows Azure Storage.
Correct. So it's pretty basic stuff here. And then I also print out the context. So most of this code was straight out of the SDK, other than, of course, adding the diagnostic. So the SDK's got some really helpful samples in here. So this is an example of a one-way listener.
And this is part of the last hands-on lab in the training course. If you come along to the training course, encourage Microsoft to run it here in New Zealand. You'll be able to do this hands-on lab. We're hoping to ship this hands-on lab to SimShip with the beta drop. So we've got some old copies of this lab. We're just revving it for the new beta build at the moment.
Correct. So we've just got a console app actually hosting this plugin at the moment, which...
It's hosting it on-premise though, remember? So CRM Online talking to on-premise.
Yeah, so this is using the service bus.
Okay, so we've built our plugin. How do we register that?
Very easily. So we come into this version of the plugin registration tool, and as you can see here, I've created earlier the service endpoint. So if I click update on that, so you just give it a name, a description if you wish.
Can we zoom in a little? Just press Windows plus.
Windows plus.
No, you haven't. Oh, you're on Windows Server 2008. Sorry.
So can you all see that okay?
Oh,
What did I do?
Is it a bit of zooming? Yeah. Oh, now I've screwed with you, haven't I? Sorry, man. You can beat me later for taking over your
Right,
demo.
click it, you said?
No, let me look. It needs to... Oh, brutal.
Yes, bear in mind this is hosted in my computer at work with only 2 gigs of RAM, so it's a
Problem exists between keyboard and chair, folks. Oh, there we go.
There we go. So
Sorry about that, man.
that's right.
Right.
So we're back and running again. So as you can see, it's just got a name, solution namespace. So that is
The app fabric solution
yep.
namespace.
So that's CRM 0 in this case. The path. So that's
Again, a way of naming a unique endpoint.
yes, it's the endpoint location.
So that's where our code that's running on premise is going to listen. It's going to call up and subscribe at that solution namespace and path to get its messages down.
So in this case, we're using a one-way contract, but you've also got options for queue, two-way, and
They've added two-way.
a RESTful contract. I haven't touched on RESTful, but it's brand new in beta build.
Yeah, those bits, I haven't tried that.
You can also
features.
specify what sort of claims you can also send with it. So say you wanted a bit of user authentication at the Azure end, you can send through like a user ID or user info.
So those are sent as WS Trust claims, right, as tokens with that message over the wire. So again, we're not doing anything with our assembly here. The assembly we've written, we hold on to that on premise, right? We never push that into the cloud. All we're doing is we're just saying, right, register a remote plugin context. No need to upload any .NET types.
And say you decided you didn't really want to play around with the ACM tool and set up claims-based authentication and get lost in that, there's this handy new button called Save and Configure ACS. So you can type in your management key, load a specific file, give it an issue a name, and click Configure.
So you get those from your Windows Azure App Fabric portal account. So when you log into App Fabric, windows.azure.com, log into App Fabric, grab your management key, your cert, your issue a name, and you're good to go.
Correct. So I'm not going to demonstrate it for now, but once you've done that, you can also go, okay, I want to save and verify. Now this will not verify because I haven't actually got it working
Give you the
yet.
big fail.
And it's not actually running the listener at this point in time, so it's going to fail. Cool. I imagine there will eventually be a message here, but again, being beta build.
Early bits.
Yep.
Okay, so that's how we register that remote plugin. How about a sandbox plugin?
Well, a sandbox plugin is simpler again. So we'll just open up the other plugin registration tool.
So we have two different versions of plugin registration tool at the moment because...
Well, for some reason I can't load assemblies into the other one. So we click update, go, okay, I want this to be sandboxed, and just click Updates, select plugin. Simple as that.
So people see that. So it's actually pretty easy to move your plugin between Sandbox and out of the Sandbox. One word of warning, there is no sort of declarative way of checking that the code you write is Sandbox compatible. Right? So yes, you can write a bunch of code that does a bunch of bad stuff, stick it in assembly, register it in the Sandbox, and it'll fall flat on its face.
Correct.
There's no, yet, if someone wants to write an open source project, sort of code analysis, code interrogation tool that actually checks your code is clean enough to run in the context of the Sandbox. Wouldn't be too hard to do. Would be quite a nice, to write that tool. Question at the front here.
Now, Microsoft's got this new certification for the...
Certified for Microsoft Dynamics?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is part of the certification process checking to see if the Sandbox behaves in a way that...
I don't know what the rules are around Certified for Microsoft Dynamics. So the question was, Microsoft has a new Certified for Microsoft Dynamics certification level. And the question was, I think, do they check that your plugin is Sandbox compatible in order to get that certification? And I don't know whether that's a requirement to get the certification yet. I don't know whether it has to be a Sandbox compatible plugin or not. But again, I'm not aware that there are any tools to actually go and do that testing. So it's likely to be testing where they go and attempt to execute all your code branches. But obviously you can imagine that you may well end up with code branches that don't get exercised properly. So you need to come up with test strategies to make sure you really are testing this idea of the Sandbox appropriately so that you don't end up with code that fails simply because CAS whacks it.
Yep. So maybe someone come up with a unit test open source project.
Yes, please. Right? Yes, please. So we are at 47 minutes, so that's really good. So it means we're going to have some time for a reasonable number of questions. So that will take some questions and hopefully provide you with some answers. Well, so remote plugin last release for CDP4 was always asynchronous, but they appear to have added a two-way option there. So I have to go and have a look at that and work out how the hell they're doing it, because typically it goes through the async service, so I don't know how they're achieving a two-way call. Have you had a look at that yet?
I haven't had a chance
No.
yet.
So this build's only a few days old, 4 or 5 days old, so we have to go and have a look at that. It'd be nice if they do.
There's helpful code in the latest SDK that it will actually has example code and explains how it exactly works. Very useful.
I will caveat, if you came to my session this morning when we talked about point-to-point integration between cloud-hosted applications and on-premise hosted applications, I am a fan of keeping those asynchronous wherever possible, because it basically gives you that idea of buffering to try and prevent slashdotting on-premise systems. Other questions? One. Oh, well, we'll take the one down the back. Yep, that's you, sir.
Can you, in terms of the solutions that you showed,
Yes.
can you actually remove, if you want to do just a pure XRM solution, can you remove the standard-based CRM solution?
You can't remove them, but you can go through and hide them. So yes, you can get into a situation where you do a pure XRM type scenario where contact disappears, where lead disappears, right? Where you massively pare that back.
How would you hide that? Still through, is it just literally clicking now, or do you still have to go through sitemap and do it?
It'll
Security, I mean, what has that method changed at all?
Well, I guess you could change the roles on the entities.
Yeah.
It's still going to be the same, basically.
Yeah, probably the easiest way is to change the role on the entity. But again, that then gets packaged as your solution package. So you could quite easily, as a builder of, if you build lots of XRM solutions, you could build a solution package that you basically install into any solution you build. And in fact, we're doing that. We are building the Intergen-based solution package. So anytime we spin up to do an XRM project, we drop in the Intergen-based solution package that includes a bunch of jQuery libraries and all the utilities that we're going to be able to rely on as part of that application. You may choose as part of that, or maybe in another layer, the next layer up, to have effectively a hide solution. And your hide solution goes through and just tears this thing back down and turns it basically into a completely empty application. We'll grab, there was one here.
Yeah, this is with regards to web resources. So you're able to load JavaScript as web resources
Correct.
into CRM. Is there any way of accessing these resources from the entity if you wanted to maybe reuse certain scripts across different entities when you customize them?
Yeah, absolutely. So web resources aren't bound to the entity, right?
Yeah.
So if, for example, can I just jump on maybe?
Sure.
Are we running?
We are.
If we jump in here, and I'm making shit up as I go, folks. So apologies if this breaks.
So do you want to edit the...
I want to look at my web resources. Let's
All
look
right.
at the web resources.
So just open up HOL.
That one.
Yep.
So if we drill down and have a look at these web resources, what I want to show you is that I can actually...
Sometimes it doesn't open.
Yeah, slow and steady wins the race on this build, guys. Try that again. Go, go, go.
Is it already open, maybe?
One of these.
Yeah, that's the one.
Alrighty, so here are my web resources. So if I jump into this web resource, and we've given these path-based names.
If you open the HTML up in the editor, it will throw out all JavaScript.
We should end up with something like web resources. Web resources, whack, what was it, lab, whole. Whole underscore whack. Who? Right, I've got a double pass. So these, does that kind of make sense to you? So these are being served up out of the CRM database, right? They're at an endpoint, so we can access this from anywhere. It's obviously secured, right? So we need to be authenticated to CRM. But as long as we're authenticated, we can reuse it from anywhere, right? So we can pick up this HTML web resource and stick it in any entity form we want to. Right? If we want to just use the JavaScript, absolutely, we can have effectively JavaScript web resources that are then available globally. So we kind of have a global set of JavaScript utilities hosted as web resources. That was your question. Right.
You could possibly even put that into a separate application like SharePoint if you had Active Directory authentication going.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
More questions? Comments? Useful stuff?
I do have another.
Yes, go for it.
In writing plugins, one of the challenges, I guess, was if I had a plugin that executed several modifications or
Yeah.
updates on entities and something went wrong,
Yeah.
I wanted to roll back.
Yeah, so the question was, I got a plugin, I do heaps of shit on my plugin, and halfway through it craps itself, and I've now got a bunch of committed changes that I didn't really want to happen. So the answer to that is plugins are now transaction capable. That was easy.
And you can choose them not to be transaction.
Yeah.
Transaction
So
if you so wish.
it's obviously switchable, but yes, they participate inside a transaction. That is not a distributed transaction. So there's no DTC. You can't sort of enlist other sort of queries. It's just the CRM operations. But yes, they are now transacted. That was the easiest hoop and holler I managed to get all week, I think.
Is that by default?
It depends on where you register in the plugin, right? So you can basically register it to be inside the transaction or outside the transaction. I've got a plugin diagram somewhere, not on my deck. Basically, you register pre-inside, pre-outside, pre-inside, post-inside, post-outside. Don't ask me difficult questions like that. Rex knows this because Rex was responsible for the work on the CTP3 labs that we built, sort of back in, it must have been January. And they said it worked and it didn't work. So we spent a lot of time with the product team actually debugging and diagnosing that. Any other questions, folks? Oh, here we go.
On that list of customizations,
Yes.
your layers, it would be really nice if you could right-click on one and change the order. Effectively change.
Yes.
It's just the order you import.
It's the order you import them. So yeah, you actually want to just be able to go say, right, rather than uninstall, reinstall, faff around. Yeah, I don't know about that.
With the CRM 211 link extensions, are they making improvements over the ADX stuff that was available before?
It's mainly just a lift of the ADX stuff at the moment. I don't think there's been a lot of change from the ADX stuff. So they license the stuff from ADX Studio. I don't think there's been a lot of change from that.
You said full link support before, but there's quite a lot missing.
Link support. CRM Metal license from Shan & Co. Yeah. Folks, thank you for coming along. We are going to be sort of hanging out around the back to take questions. As soon as this stuff is actually publicly in beta, feel free to tap myself or any of the Indigent folks. I'd love to talk more about it. Sort of mum's the word for another 2 or 3 weeks. Thank you for coming along. Please do your evals. Any feedback gladly taken. Good feedback very gladly taken. And thank you for coming along. I hope you had a marvellous Tech Head. We'll see you all next year. I have one more session to do out of my 5. That's this afternoon. 400 level, building a Windows Phone plus Windows Azure. If you're a code monkey and you like really hardcore stuff, come along to that. It's been great having you. Thank you.